Today on Unpacked, you fall asleep, and from your memory, what do you remember next?
I woke up in ICU. What hurt me the most is that everybody I was with that night is gone. We were involved in a very bad car accident and I'm the sole survivor. Everybody that night was happy. All the boys were happy. They were smiling. They were doing what they love. That's the last thing I remember.
Surviving a highly publicized car accident where you're the only survivor, and the South African music industry mourned the lives of those lost. Today's guest is here to share her story. Let's unpack. The 7th of August 2021 is the day that Peloyame Segatle's life took a monumental turn. The economic student had agreed to accompany her DJ friend to his work events that weekend. However, she did not anticipate how that weekend would end. She would then wake up in a hospital bed weeks later to news of loss, and with her name in newspaper headlines countrywide. This is her story. Let's unpack. Peloyame, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So take us back to you actually met or were meeting one of the individuals that were in the car crash. Who was that person and how did you guys meet?
That person was Kanya Hadebe, but everyone knows him as The Voice. So how I met him was that a friend called me and she said we should go out, just live life, be young, have fun, party. So I met Voice at a club, actually. It's called Great Dane from. That's how I met him. But when I met him, I didn't know he was a DJ. I just thought, oh, we're just partying as friends and I'm meeting new people. And it's never a crime to meet new people and to bond with new people. After that week, and that's when I found out that, oh, he was a DJ. And from then onwards, we just became closer and closer and closer.
So you guys became friends, so you'd hang out and go to gigs or whatever together?
Yeah, like we'd hang out, go to gigs, movie night, games night, have our very own master chefs in the kitchen. Yeah.
And you say that you got to know that he's a DJ. Did you realize how big he was in the music industry?
With time, yes, but like at the beginning, I didn't know how big he was. I just thought at the beginning he was a up-and-coming DJ. Like he's still trying to get his feet into the music industry. Then only after everything, I was like, oh, actually, he's a big deal.
And what was happening in your life at that time? Were you studying and where were you living?
I was living in Joburg and I was studying at the time. Or I still currently am studying. But it was just the mix of everything, like balancing your social life, your academic life.
So, because you're not actually from Gauteng?
No, home is in the northwest in Rustenburg, but I live in Joburg for academic reasons.
Yes. Okay, so what then happened the day before the accident?
The day before the accident, Voice called me and he told me that he has multiple gigs for that weekend and he would really appreciate it if I could accompany him for all his gigs. And then I said, okay, let's do it. And then he told me I needed to pack. I asked him, okay, but for me, what am I packing for? He was like, no, I'll tell you. When I just pack clothing for like 2 to 3 days and then we can go. So I packed my clothing and then on the day he requested an Uber for me. And then like he tracked the entire ride until I arrived at his apartment. And then
which is also in Joburg?
Yes, which is also in Joburg. And then that's when we left to their first gig, which was in Pretoria.
So who was all there when you say, because you say an Uber came to collect you and their gigs, who is all of them?
At the time, it was Voice, Mpura, and I. So we went to Pretoria. And the ride to Pretoria was very fun. Like, we were all singing in the car, making jokes in the car, just laughing. And then eventually we arrived at another club in Pretoria called Propaganda.
When you got to Pretoria,
Yes.
Who was it that was actually in the group that you were with that was playing?
When we got to Pretoria, it was Mpura, Voice, and I. And then later on, the boys fetched me upstairs because they were downstairs performing, and I was upstairs sitting, just waiting for them to finish performing.
And had you met Mpura prior to this?
No,
It was the first time.
That was the first time I met him.
And did you know who he was?
I knew who he was because of like social media and music videos, and he was a very lovely man, a very funny man too.
Yes.
And then after they were done performing, they called me upstairs to tell me that we needed to leave for another gig. And then we went downstairs and then we waited for our transport. And then we got into our transport.
So when you left the Pretoria club, who was in the car with you?
When we left the club at Pretoria, we were 5 in the car, including me.
So 2 other people joined you?
Yes.
Okay, and who were the 2 other people that joined you?
The other 2 people were Tando and TD.
Okay, and had you met them before?
No. I basically met everyone on that night, except for Voice.
Okay.
Yes.
So Tando and, did you say TD?
TD.
TD.
Yes.
Are they also in the music industry?
I don't know.
Okay. So now there's 5 of you in the car. And what happens next on your way to Rustenburg?
I remember we were like making jokes in the car and we were singing along to the music that was playing in the car. Then eventually I told Voice that I'm tired and I want to sleep. Then he said I could sleep on his shoulder and he'll wake me up when we arrive to our next destination. Then I fell asleep.
And who was driving the car at this point?
I think it was Tando or TD, one of the 2.
Okay, so you fall asleep. And from your memory, what do you remember next?
I woke up in ICU. That's what happened. And obviously when I woke up, I naturally assumed we would all be in the same hospital because we were all in the same car.
So when you woke up, because obviously everybody's experiences are different in terms of waking up after a car accident, were you waking up with the knowledge that I was just in the car with people? Or were you waking up still confused, where am I and how did I get here?
It's a bit of both. So I woke up and I was confused because I didn't understand why I was in hospital, how I landed in hospital. And the last thing I remember was being in the car with everybody else laughing. So how did I land in hospital?
And when you woke up, who's the first person that came to see you? Was it a nurse or family?
I don't know, because my family came to check up on me, but I don't remember this happening. But one of the first people I remember I saw was my dad.
So in the time that you were in the hospital, confused, not knowing what's going on, and nobody was really saying anything to you explicitly, did you ever hear or see anything that might have hinted to what had happened?
Yes. So I remember there was a day when a nurse came to give me my food and medication for the day. But the doctors quickly called her to check something. So she left. But because she left so quickly, she forgot her phone by my bedside table. I overlooked and her phone was on the Google Explore page. And that's when I saw my name, Mpura's name, Kila's name, Tando's name, everybody's name. And I was confused because I didn't understand why we were on the internet. But I just told myself, relax. The boys will explain everything. They'll explain why you guys landed in hospital, what happened, so you guys could be in hospital. Just focus on healing, getting better. And the day you get discharged, the boys will explain everything. And Voice would put my heart at ease like he always did.
So in that time, was your family visiting you in that month?
Yes.
And were they not saying anything?
I don't think, even though they knew, but like they didn't want to ambush me, I guess. You know, they just let me stay in hospital because I was in a critical condition, and they just tried their best to be there for me. Because if my daughter, God forbid, but if my daughter was ever in a situation that I was in, the first thing I'd say to her when I go visit her in the hospital is not, oh, my love, you're involved in an accident. I'll just ask, like, are you okay? Is there anything you need?
So just so I understand, you spent a couple of days in hospital, and in that time, there's obviously gaps in your memory. Nobody's really explicitly said, listen, you're in a car accident, that's why you're in the hospital.
Like, I was in ICU for a month. And within that time, like, no one had said anything to me at the beginning. And then I was just wondering, why am I in hospital? Where are the boys? Where's boys? Then one day I remember I was watching TV. Then I saw someone on TV, and that person said, Mpura was a funny man. And I was confused because I was like, what do you mean he was a funny man? He is a funny man. I met that man a few days ago, and that man is hilarious. But then I just let it go. And then a few minutes after that, someone stepped on stage, and then they said, the voice was a creative. And I was like, what do you mean was a creative? My friend is honestly the most creative person I've ever met. Like, he's a genius. He is creative. So I was trying to piece the puzzle together because, one, why am I in hospital? Two, why is the entire world speaking in past tense? What's going on? Then that's when I demanded to see voice and transfer my ward room, because I thought if I'm in the hospital and I need to get better, I might as well do it next to a friendly face or a familiar face. And that's when they told me that we were involved in a very bad car accident and I'm the sole survivor.
You mentioned earlier that you saw Killer Gao's name also. But when you fell asleep, there were only 5 of you in the car.
Yes.
Did you not question mark that?
I did, because I don't know when the boys picked up Killer Gao. I don't know when this happened, but also I was asleep.
In terms of your injuries, because, you mentioned you were in a critical condition, what did the doctors explain to you about your injuries?
So after I found out about the entire accident, I remember I asked the doctors to be discharged, because in my head I was like, if my friend really did pass away, I can't miss his funeral. At least allow me to be discharged so I could say my goodbyes. At the time, the doctors told me that unfortunately everybody I was with in the car had been put to rest 3 weeks ago. And I started crying. I broke down on the spot, and I asked the doctors, why didn't anybody wake me up so I could go to my friend's funeral and say my goodbye? And then they said there was nothing they could do because I was in a coma and I was heavily sedated with medication. So even if they wanted to wake me up, it wasn't wise because I was in a critical condition.
So what were those injuries that you had?
I fractured a few bones. I fractured my hip. I fractured my ribs. I fractured my right clavicle. Had internal bleeding, lacerated a kidney, lacerated a liver, had a hematoma, which got infected, and then it became septic. It's a lot. The list
and what is a hematoma?
It's basically when, like, your skin experiences trauma and blood.
Almost like a bad bruise.
Yes, basically.
A very bad bruise.
And then the blood just spreads around your tissue instead of, like, within your veins.
Did you have any head injuries?
Yes, I did.
And what were some of those head injuries? Was it just a concussion or something worse?
Something worse. So I have no idea what happened, but my head hit something within the accident, and essentially it opened my head, like the skin. Nothing happened in terms of, like, brain injury or brain damage, but, like, it did cause trauma towards my skin.
So the doctor explains to you that everybody's been buried 3 weeks ago because they couldn't wake you up. How long were you in a coma for?
About a week. And then I think after that it was just being heavily sedated with medication because I needed to rest. My body needed to rest in order for me to heal.
So who did you speak to first about the revelation from the doctor about the fact that you were in a car accident and everybody died?
I guess everyone knew before I knew. So even when I had a conversation with like my mom or my dad or like my best friend, everyone already knew what had happened before I knew what had happened.
So who did you talk to about it first? Was it your mom? Was it a friend?
I spoke to my parents first. And then after my parents, I spoke to my friends.
What were your parents' reflections on in that conversation?
My parents were just saying, yes, it is tragic that I went through what I went through, but I must just focus on getting better. And I'm alive, and that's all that matters.
Did anybody at any point, I mean, they were telling you that they didn't make it. Did anybody have the details as to what had happened, or up until that point while you were in the hospital, nobody knew or could share with you?
Nobody knew.
The car accident involved another car. So when did you find out that there was another car, and what happened to the passenger in the other car?
About a month and 3 weeks after that happened.
And how did you find out?
I found out through social media.
Wow.
I literally found out everything through social media, which broke my heart because I would never wish this upon anyone. But finding out that one of the closest people in your life died next to you, and you find out through social media, tabloids, it's the worst.
So when did you eventually get access to technology to be reading what was going on or getting messages from people asking how you are doing?
A month and 2 weeks after.
Were you still in the hospital at this point?
I was in and out of the hospital because I remember they discharged me, but I had medical complications, so I needed to go in and out of the hospital. So every time I went to the hospital, I'd literally cross my fingers and hope I don't get readmitted again.
Yes, yes. So you get access to your phone. Are you back home at this point?
Yes.
And I mean, I can understand your phone being kept away from you. Was your phone recovered from the accident scene, or it was a brand new phone?
My phone was recovered from the accident scene, but it's completely destroyed. So my parents gave me my little brother's old phone so I can use for temporary reasons until they get me a new phone.
What were some of the first things that you saw when you got access to your phone?
I saw missed calls from my friends, and some of my friends would text me every day from the day of the accident, and like some of the texts would say they're well aware that I won't be able to see the text at the time they send the text, but they just hope I get better, they miss me, and I should fight.
And then when you started going online, what was one of the first articles or blogs or things that you saw about what you went through?
One of the first things I saw was that apparently I had died in the car accident. That was one of the first things I saw.
Did they mention you, or they said everybody died in the car accident?
They mentioned me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I just decided that everything in terms of the accident, I just don't want to read about it because it's just going to slow my progression in terms of healing. So I just detached myself from social media for 2 months. I left Instagram, I left Twitter, any form of social media. I just said, I'm okay with it.
And that was because you read that you had died?
It's a lot of things combined. There's that, because I read I had died. Also, I was just trying to grieve my friend, trying to process everything that had happened. The whole world wanted answers from me, answers which I don't have. And I just felt like it was a lot.
Do you feel like people were trying to get hold of you to find out what happened?
Yes. People were trying to get a hold of me to find out what had happened about that night. And I don't have the answers because I don't know what happened. I was asleep. The last thing I remember is everyone laughing, smiling. Then I fell asleep and then I woke up in hospital. I don't know what happened.
So in that time of recovery, what did you spend your days doing?
I went to therapy and I also had to go to physiotherapy because I couldn't walk. My body was extremely weak and I needed to go to physiotherapy to not to learn how to walk again, but to basically mobilize my body again. So that's what I did. I went to physiotherapy and
this was all back home in Rustenburg?
Yes.
Yes.
And I went to physiotherapy.
And obviously school paused for that time. What was therapy like, considering you're processing something you don't even remember happening?
Therapy, at the beginning, it was hard. But with time, I got comfortable and I could just speak about everything that I was going through. At the beginning, I was just confused because I wanted answers to get closure. I wanted to understand what happened that night. And what hurt me the most is that everybody I was with that night is gone. So nobody can explain what happened. And even the person we collided with, he's gone too. May their souls all rest in peace. But it really hurt that there isn't a single soul on this planet who can tell me what happened that night. So trying to understand why certain events happened that night was hard, but it helped going to therapy because I had survivor's guilt. I felt guilty for being alive. And I worked through my issues with my therapist.
Your survivor's guilt that you experienced, was it amplified by the fact that they were known in the country? Did it make it worse?
Yes, to a certain extent. It made it worse because they were public figures. Not that I'm saying if they weren't public figures, my survivor's guilt would have been less amplified. I had survivor's guilt either way because I just couldn't understand how I survived, yet everyone else didn't. But it made things very difficult for me because they were all public figures and they were all in the limelight per se.
At what point did you find out, about the person that you had collided with and their vehicle and what happened to them?
I found out from an old friend. It was someone I used to go to high school with. And then he told me what had happened and I found out through him. I think this was a month and 3 weeks after the incident had happened, or 2 months after.
And what did they say to you?
He was just asking me, how am I, like my healing process, my psychological process, how's everything going? And then he was just telling me that as much as everything that has happened is sad and is traumatic, he is very grateful that I'm alive. And if ever I need anything, he's a call away.
So I want us to get a better understanding of that survivor's guilt, which basically becomes why did I survive and everybody else is gone? How did you manage to work through accepting that you are here and not have you feeling like I should have died?
2 things. So it was therapy and just God. Every day praying, asking for guidance, clarity. And then one day I had a conversation with myself that I should stop blaming myself for what happened because it really isn't my fault. At the end of the day, we were all in the same situation. We're all in a very traumatic and very tragic incident. So I shouldn't blame myself for what happened that day because it's not my fault. It's not anyone's fault.
At some point, you mentioned that people were trying to come to you for answers, and then you did resurface on social media eventually. Did you respond to any of the people? Because I think at some point journalists were trying to get in touch with you to do interviews. Did you come back to them, and what did you decide to do?
I didn't come back to any of them. I just said no to everyone, or I didn't respond because I needed my space.
I understand that.
And I needed my space to be respected.
Yeah. Do you think that, and when I say the public, I make that a very general comment of people commenting on social media, the media, journalists, anybody. Do you think that they were invasive in your life when it came to the story?
Yes, they were. I think because not a lot of people, and when I say like not a lot of people, I mean everybody else except my friends and family, nobody knew what happened that night and the impact it had on my life specifically. So I think it's very easy just to comment and say, oh, what happened that night? Tell us what happened about the other boys, 1, 2, 3, and not consider someone else's feelings because you want the answers you feel that you deserve. So I did feel like some people were being invasive and they were being entitled.
What were some of the assumptions that were made about you?
That I got in the car because I was romantically involved with one of the boys. The other things that were assumed about me, I don't want to get into them because they were just nasty.
Did they imply that you were what people say stalker or just a fan?
Yes, ma'am. When in actual fact, the reason why I was in the car that night was because I left my apartment with the sole purpose to be a supportive friend towards Voice.
So why did you decide now that you are ready to have a conversation about your experience?
I decided to have a conversation now because, one, it also helps with my healing process. Two, even though I can't give the entire world the closure they deserve, but just to let anyone know if they were wondering what happened that night, just to tell them the things I remember from that night so we could all get the closure we need so we can move on. Because everybody that night was happy. All the boys were happy. They were smiling. They were doing what they love. That's the last thing I remember. So in terms of closure, that's the only thing I can give to people.
And I mean also details like the fact that you didn't actually meet Kilagau at all. You went to sleep and at some point he happened to be in the car, but you didn't actually meet him.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, because you said no or nothing to the many people that wanted to do interviews with you. Do you think the timing now is right, or were you also concerned about the type of platform that you would have been speaking at, that your words would not be taken as you said them?
Yes. Because social media does have a tendency of twisting things. And I didn't want anyone to twist my words regarding this matter because it's a very sensitive and it's a personal matter, not only to me, but to the friends and families of the people who were involved in the car.
Have you had an opportunity, because Voice was your friend, to speak to his family, and did they try to reach out to you?
The family has tried to reach out to me, and my plan is to meet the family someday.
So what is the reason that you have not yet responded to, meet with them?
There were just a lot of things happening on my side. Like there were a lot of personal things happening, but I'm slowly getting the courage to meet with the family.
What is your biggest fear when you meet with them?
I think one of my biggest fears was that I didn't want to be a reason to trigger the family, like a reminder that, oh, she was with our son the day he passed away. I think that was one of the biggest things I was afraid of. And then when I got in contact with someone who is very close to the family, that person told me that the family always kept me in their prayers. And they were just worried about me, so that did ease my heart.
Did any of the other individuals that were in the accident, their family members, try to get in touch with you?
Not that I know of.
So, obviously that was your one friend. We can't speak for the other individuals that you didn't know, but just in terms of honoring the memory, how would you describe him as a person? You've already said that Voice was talented. Tell us a bit more.
He was an amazing person. He was the type of person to just make you forget about your problems, make you laugh, make you smile. He loved cooking. He loved cooking. So sometimes after his gigs, we would go to a friend's apartment so we could rest for the night. And I remember this one time, it was 3 a.m. and Voice started cooking at 3 a.m. after we came back from a gig. And I assumed, oh, maybe he's making something like popcorn, you know, because we were watching a movie at the time. Then Voice asked a friend of mine where was her chopping board. Then we all turned and looked at Voice in the kitchen and we asked him, what are you preparing? He was like, no, we should relax, focus on the movie. Then later on, he asked that very same friend where are her onions and her spices. And then we turn around and we ask Voice, we're like, dude, what are you preparing at 3 a.m.? And he was like, no, he's making chicken curry and rice at 3 a.m. And then he asked us to help him in the kitchen. We all stood up from the couch and we helped him in the kitchen to prepare the meal he wanted to make for us.
What would you want people to know about Voice as a person?
He was a very caring person, a very supportive person. He was very protective of his friends, of the people he loved, whether you were friends or family. He always went the extra mile to make sure that you were okay, to ease your heart, to put a smile on your face. He was the life of the party.
Is it still hard for you to say was?
It is. One day, I'll be able to say was, but I'm still getting there.
How much harder has it been that you didn't get an opportunity to go to his funeral?
That was one of the biggest blows. It has been really, really, really hard. And I think it was really hard, and it is still hard because I didn't get my chance to say goodbye. Maybe if I got my chance to say goodbye and I saw the grave going down, maybe I would have been at peace and I would have said, okay, it's actually happening, like he's not here anymore.
How are you, or how have you found a way to say goodbye to him?
Every time I miss him, I write him a letter. So every time I miss him or I just want to speak to him, I just write him a letter and I keep all those letters in a green box because everyone called him Illuminator Greens. So I keep those letters in a green box. I guess that's my way of saying goodbye.
In terms of yourself, what would you like people to know about you, if anything? Because so much has been said about you online in your absence. What would you like to clarify or have them know?
Where do I even start? There's so many things I want to say. For starters, I don't think it's fair for the media to assume things about people's life and assume the worst. At that fact, I wasn't in the car because I was a fan or a stalker or whatever the case may be. I was in the car because I was being a supportive friend. And I left my apartment that day because I just wanted to bond with my friend. Not because there was any hidden agenda. I did it out of love because I wanted to bond and spend time with someone I cared about, someone I loved.
Some time has passed. And in that time, we also need to be mindful that your healing is not just about physical injuries. It's also about the emotional trauma of your life being put on hold, losing losing somebody that you love, plus feeling sympathy for the other people that were there, the survivor's guilt that you're dealing with, having to manage your own mental health. It's a lot. And in that time, conversations are happening in your absence. And I think I wanted you to have an opportunity to say what you needed to say for you.
The only thing I have to say is that I need to give myself more credit for the things that I've overcome. Because I had survivor's guilt and I've overcome that, and I need to give myself more credit for the things that I've overcome. As much as what had happened is very traumatic, I still have my whole life ahead of me. And I'm gonna do amazing things. I don't know what exactly I'm gonna do, but I'll see. And God has a plan for me, like He has a plan for everyone. I don't know what He has planned for me, but I'm excited to see.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that it was not easy to make the decision to come and talk when for a long time you were not even trying to engage on any level, but you've given us your time, you've shared your story, and I hope it's as healing for you as what you needed it to be, and that, you know, any speculations can end after this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Hashtag Unpacked with Relebogile. We remember the lives that were lost in that car accident. And of course, we celebrate everything they stood for, not just those that were big and famous and well-known in the music industry, but also those that were not. It was an absolutely tragic accident, which has affected the life of its sole survivor, Peloyame, who is here with us. And I'm so, so grateful that she's been able to share her story. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a good night. Next time on Unpacked.
Very playful child, very jolly, happy. Opened the room and there was a funny smell. Pushing himself up against the wall and saying, "The ants are coming for me, can't you see them?" His cheeks were fallen in, he was thin. I would choke him up against the wall. He's positive and he's on several different types of substances.
Thank you so much for watching Unpacked with Relebogile Mabotja. Make sure you subscribe to my channel where you can get to watch more episodes. But more importantly, you can be part of our online community. Comment down below, share with us who you'd like to see on the show, what story you'd like us to discuss. We love engaging with you. Keep it coming and don't forget to subscribe.